Let's start it off a little bit chronologically here. Let's start off with
Yeah.
how you first got involved with Chris Hansen.
I created Twitter like late 2019, and I never used it. I only had like 30 followers for like months until this kind of blew up. And I saw somebody share something about Chris Hansen was going to be starting to look into Dahvie Vanity, and a couple of my friends tagged me in it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to shoot my shot, whatever. And I posted, the pictures that I have of me and Dahvie from when I was 13, and I posted like a little iPod note type of thing, and just basically gave like a brief summary of my story. And I was like, if anybody wants to listen, because at that point, I think I talked to Fizzy as well. Before this happened, I think because I was the first one coming to him about Dahvie, he took a lot of time to talk to me about it. So he ended up DMing me on Twitter for a day or so, and then called me on the Tuesday before his Wednesday show would hopefully be with the Dahvie Vanity case. And we talked for a couple hours about everything. And I sent him the pictures. I sent him everything that I had, proving that I, at one point in time, knew this guy. And I went on his show the next day. And that was pretty much it for how we met.
Somebody actually asked this in the chat, and I was gonna ask as well. Like, do you feel like he is helping the investigation itself?
No.
Okay.
No.
And I think that we have to be specific about that question, because we're saying the investigation, right? And we're not talking about like,
Yeah.
I guess, because I mean, from my perception, it seems like he certainly has helped get awareness to the story. There's no denying that. But it's
Yeah.
beyond
No,
that.
of course. I mean, he's, like I said in the beginning of my note, and I will stand by it, I do not regret going on his show one bit. And I don't think that his show should be canceled, because it's super important for people to feel like their voices are heard. There's nothing wrong with sharing people's stories and sharing your experience through his channel. However, all of the little like details that are being, thrown around on the internet about him helping and him doing this it's just not true. He's not helping the investigation. He is helping get voices out there, which is amazing. That's a great thing. People should have their voices heard. But he I feel like this is a good transition into another topic that we were going to discuss about his lack of connection to the actual FBI and law enforcement. It actually wasn't until quite a few months into, or I think the timeline's all wonky. I can't believe it's been, when was that? March, and it's August now. It wasn't until we had an FBI agent assigned to the case that he finally got in touch with an FBI agent regarding everything. And at first, they didn't even want to be speaking with him or involved with him.
Okay.
So he didn't have law enforcement connections.
Okay.
He didn't have FBI.
So when you talked to him for the first time, did it ever come up? Because you said you had a phone call for a couple hours or so.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever ask him about like what he could do for the story or the investigation or anything like that? I guess, like, what could he do for you or justice, I suppose.
Yeah, of course. And he of course always left it with like open-ended or like, generalized statements like, oh yeah, I know people, I have connections to law enforcement from, when I had my time on NBC, and I have these connections and like different things. And I didn't know what he was talking about because I'd never spoken to an FBI agent until a couple months into the investigation. So I didn't know any different from what he was saying to me. I don't remember the exact terminology he would use every time, but he would very often say, yeah, I have connections to this law enforcement. I have this, and this. And I was always like, okay, cool.
So to be clear, now there is an open case, and but that is not exactly to any aid from Chris Hansen.
No, not at all. Tamimi, if Tamimi's still in the chat, Tamimi and Creepshow Art are the ones who found us our FBI agent. Like, we owe that to them. Like, without Tamimi and Shannon, we would not have the person that we have right now, who is amazing. And them and their partner have just been incredible. And we wouldn't have that because with Chris Hansen, we kept asking and asking when it was going to go farther and never got anywhere with it.
Yeah, I remember in one of Shannon's videos, she had Tamimi in a little bit of a segment where Tamimi went into how she emailed Chris Hansen, how she had information about Dahvie, and he kind of like responded, but then kind of ghosted her for a couple weeks, and then she got frustrated because she's like, yo, this is serious. Like, I want to get in touch with the FBI because, and she took it upon herself to, get in touch with Shannon, and then they both, between the two of them, made it possible, and then they put you in touch with the FBI.
Yeah.
So, right, I find that to be...
We owe it to them. We really do. And I can't thank them enough for that, because without them, I don't know how long it would have taken for us to realize that he didn't have it, like he said he did. And then one of us would have had to figure something out. And just, I don't know what would have happened, because we were all wanting justice so badly, but we didn't know how to go about doing it. Because when you think about contacting the FBI, you think like, whoa, like that's got to be intense. It's got to be something really hard to do. When in reality, it's pretty easy to submit a tip in, and it's easy to get in contact with people.
Well,
So
I mean, it's not only that, but it obviously has to be like valuable enough for the FBI to take it seriously, and they help that make that happen. Which is for someone that was victimized by Dahvie, like it's like, where do you even begin, right? So yeah, big shouts to Mimi and Shannon for that help. I think.
I'm sorry, I just glanced over at the chat and I saw Gene say, remember, Chris can't take on every case, and that's totally fair. And he said, we asked him to take on Dahvie. That's completely fair. It's like I said like a little bit ago. It's totally fine if people keep going to him for Dahvie cases to get their story out there. Just, it's not fine when he's sitting there saying, I have this, this, and this, and he doesn't. It's not cool to lie, to make yourself seem like, if you just want to be a platform where people can share their voices, then just say, hey, this is my show where you can talk about your experience. Don't say this is your show, or this is our show where I have this connection in this one, when you don't have it.
Right. So he's giving off
the issue is.
He's giving off an impression of being beyond a platform, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that a big issue with Chris Hansen is that he flexes these words like FBI, police, and investigation, right? So this kind of language makes the viewer think that, oh shoot, something's gonna happen. Oh, Chris Hansen gonna get him, especially when when you put into consideration his history with To Catch a Predator. Back then, when he was working with NBC, obviously he had a whole team, and all he was doing really was just reading a script, if we're being real. And he had the executives and the whole production get in touch with the police. So like, who knows how much he really did? But of course, a normal person would assume that being a journalist and TV journalist, as he calls himself, for so long, you would assume that he'd have some sort of, not only just connection, but at least like some sort of knowledge that he could provide as far as like how things move along.
Yeah, or like how to go about contacting these people. If he's not in contact, then he should do what I was doing and what Mal was doing or is doing, and at least help people in doing so. You know what I mean? Like it's, if you don't have the connection yourself, at least have instructions for how other people can take it into their own hands.
Right. Because
you're giving out a lot of false hope, and a lot of people, like, you got to keep in mind that a lot of these people and these survivors are very traumatized, and it's scary enough for them to go on a live stream. So when they conquer that, they are too scared to really go about doing anything else, or they might not feel confident enough in trying to find out for themselves. So they're very heavily relying on the person who is making loud claims that they're going to help them.
So when you first started working with them, what was it like? Like you talked to him about quite a bit, and then you went on his show, and then afterwards you helped him get guests on the show.
Yeah, I became basically an assistant. I don't want to say I was responsible for, but it was very heavily implied that if I could find people, and if I could go, find people to be on the show and find survivors, then that would be so helpful, and then they can be on the show. So I was staying up until like 6 a.m. every night, messaging people, reaching out to people, going through emails. If people sent me voice recordings because they weren't comfortable typing it, I would have my laptop ready and I would be typing out an entire statement for them and then submitting it to Chris. And when he would lose an email, I'd be like, no problem. And I would forward it to him again. And it drove a huge wedge between me and my fiance, because he would come home from work and I wouldn't have slept at all while he was gone. I would just be on my computer, just invested in this for hours and hours and hours. And that was when, me and you talked about another person who had done that in the past, and how I don't need to, do what they were doing because they were putting in too much work and they were like killing themselves over it and just driving themselves into the ground. And I was like, oh no, I'm fine. Like, cause if I don't do it, then nobody else is going to. Right. And then when you look at it, if I'm not doing it and nobody else is going to, that's a problem.
Exactly. And it's frustrating for me to witness, and I saw it happen in the Onision investigation, and I'm like seeing it happen with Ashlee, and I'm like, oh no, please. And it's disappointing. And I you can literally watch the video that I did in January.
It's very interesting because I feel like it's become a bit of a spectacle, like a show. For better or worse, I don't know. I personally, and I'm very curious for you guys' thoughts, by the way, but I personally do have faith in Chris Hansen's work.
Yeah, and it's hard to witness this stuff.
I don't know, like, it sucks really, really bad. And I don't regret helping anybody. I don't regret that at all, because it was helpful. It did get things done. I was able to have people to refer back to whenever we did have an agent where I could help them, file police reports and, submit their statements to the FBI. But it just like, when I look back on, it feels like so long ago. And I don't know. I don't even know how to word this because I'm like getting upset thinking about it, because it's just like, I was so just like driving myself into the ground. Like, I was not okay. I've always had really bad, panic attacks, and I've always, had an issue with like dissociating, but like it was way worse than it's ever been in my entire life. And when I try to think about who I was just even in March and April, I don't know who that was, because I was so hard to be around because I was just so focused on it, and I was just really wearing myself down, and it just sucked. Like, and I felt, because I was so public about it on Twitter and everything, I felt like it was my responsibility to keep on doing it. So I was posting about it all the time still. And then when I did, I felt so guilty. I think I even talked to you like one of the nights before I like first told everybody like, okay, like leave me alone. Like everybody lay off. Like I need a break. And I felt so guilty for wanting to take time for myself when it wasn't really my job to be doing it to begin with.
Right.
And it just sucks really bad. Like it sucks thinking about it.
And you're the type of person that will like, you have to kind of express yourself. Otherwise you feel kind of, and I'm the same way. Like I feel kind of like mentally like clogged almost. Like you want to unclog. Yeah. You want to get it out. Otherwise it feels like,
yeah. You just feel like you're like trapped, or you just have something, it's like on the tip of your tongue, and like, you just can't say,
suffocating kind of feel. Yeah. So like that's, yeah, it's hard. So in this text message, you said to him, sorry that it's late. I just got off the FaceTime call with a 16-year-old who is currently speaking to Dahvie. He's FaceTiming her daily and reached out because feels uncomfortable with it. She wants to help. She showed me screen caps of their calls, and I took some notes. I want to talk to you about it. Can we talk about her this afternoon? So he said, absolutely. Let me know when it's good for you.
Yeah.
So then, later that day, you asked him if he was available, and he said, give me like 30 minutes. Did you guys talk that time?
Yeah, we talked that day. We ended up being on the phone, and I was so upset because this girl, I felt so bad for her because she was just crying on the phone with me, and she was so uncomfortable, and she was so young and just so small. And I felt so bad for her. And I was like crying on the phone with him because I'm watching this girl be used by him right now. And like, we have to do something. Like, what can we do to help her? And he told me that, he told me that, well, find out where she lives. And he probably, this is like literally verbatim, he's like, I probably have connections in law enforcement out there from when I was on the show. So find out where she lives and tell me, and then I'll see what I can do. And we'll get it taken care of. And I was like, oh, thank God. So I had something to report back to this girl with. And I told her, like, listen, like, we're going to figure it out. Like, we got this. Don't worry about it. Like, we'll get this taken care of. If he's still calling you, just don't do anything you're not comfortable with. And when he was calling her, when Dahvie was calling this girl, he was asking to see her bedroom. Like, he was asking her to show her entire room to him so that he would know if she had a camera anywhere, if there was anybody else in the room recording the conversations before he would proceed in asking her sexual favors. So me and her came up with a game plan where she was going to have an iPad or something, or have her phone up somewhere that he couldn't see. And then I would record it for her. So I would be screen recording their call for her. So he didn't get like any notifications of her screenshotting or screen recording, because he does this all through Instagram video calls. Yeah. So you get notifications. At least I think you get notifications through that. But either way, we were figuring that out. And I kept asking Chris, like, because she was really scared to go through with it. So me and her kept kind of going back and forth, like, okay, well, we'll do it this time. We'll do it this time. So I kept asking him, like, have you heard anything? Because this girl, he's still calling her. Like, she was sending me screenshots where he's calling her literally 30 times a day. This 36-year-old man was FaceTiming a 16-year-old girl 30 times a day. And they were like talking through text or like through Messenger, sending each other pictures, just like regular photos of themselves. And I kept I kept telling him about it on the phone. And I was like, hey, when can we hear, when did you hear back from somebody? Like, when can we do something about this? And it was just like, I will soon. I have this here. I'm waiting on hearing back from somebody else. I'm waiting on this. I'm waiting on that. And then 2 weeks go by, and this girl FaceTimes me again, and we're like, okay, you know what? Fuck it. We're not going to wait for Chris Hansen. We're just going to do this now. So I looked up the laws. I'm like recording phone calls and everything. And they said, as long as the person is doing something illegal, it's okay. So I was like, all right, cool. We're good. And we started setting everything up. And then mid call with this girl, she realizes that Dahvie has blocked her because he got suspicious because she wasn't sending him pictures anymore. So we lost the ability for anything.
Okay.
And, yeah.
So you feel like Chris kind of like stalled you by saying, oh, well, I'll get you connections. Didn't come through, and you were like, all right, well, we'll do it. We'll figure out a way. And you kind of wanted to record it. And then it didn't end up being possible because it kind of stalled too long.
Yeah, he just kept putting it off. And that in particular just sucks so bad because it's like I was watching this young girl like fall apart and like blame herself, and like she felt bad because she had sent him something in the past and she felt awful about it, and she just wanted to help so bad. Like she wanted to help so bad, and then we just lost it.
Did she tell you at what point she like realized like that it was wrong, or what made her like snap that he doesn't act like Dahvie was doing was wrong? Or
well, she started like watching interviews, which she found me through watching mine, and she watched like I think Pastel Ballad started doing interviews around this time, so she started talking to her and like watching her interviews, and she messaged me. Her first message to me was asking me if it was true, and I was like, yeah, like I mean, unfortunately, it is true. Like, are you okay? What's going on? And that's when she told me that all of this was happening, and whenever she would FaceTime me or talk to me about it, would be very conflicted because she would say 1 second he's playing guitar for her and they're having great conversations, and the next he's asking these things of her and like to like reveal herself on camera. And so she was confused, and that's what he does. That's him grooming her into feeling special and then using her. Right.
Yeah, and that's again the grooming part is what I would like to emphasize, is that it's not like just because we hear of him asking for pictures and stuff like that. It's not like his relationships with people start off with, oh, hey, can I see a picture of this? Like, can I see this? Like, he obviously starts by flattering the person and then we'll do this kind of thing. Like, it's never as simple.
He doesn't just slide into your DMs like, hey, like, and say nasty stuff. Like, he slides in and he makes you feel special, and he plays guitar for you, and he shows you all these things and exclusive merch designs, and he makes you feel like you are like somebody that's very close, like a close friend to him. And then he starts being creepy.
So right here on April 24th, you said, yeah, let's catch up tomorrow. I just want to update on everything. And you said, sounds good. And this is actually the weekend of the Jeffree Star interview. And so he reached out to you saying, let's catch up. And then the next following day you said, I'm available all day whenever you are, like, hey, let's talk. And then you also said that you were sent a photo of a 13-year-old being kissed on the lips by Dahvie, and you were shook. So you were sent the photo by the person themselves, or what?
They sent it to me in a Twitter DM. And it was a photo of them at a concert with him kissing on the mouth. So I texted Chris that, and I was like, hey, I just got sent this really inappropriate picture, and I didn't know what was deemed evidence and what wasn't at the time. And unfortunately, that does not qualify as evidence. But at the time, I didn't know that. So I'm like, hey, like, this is like him actually mouth to mouth with a minor. Like, this is something serious. And he never replied to me. So
did you ever have a call? Because, he had Chip saying, let's catch up tomorrow.
No.
Okay. And then the next day
he never called me about it.
And the next day you say good luck today in reference to the Jeffree Star interview.
Yeah. And I was a little frustrated because he hadn't gotten back to me, and I had this like serious photo that, at least at the time, I thought it was like some serious evidence, and it sounds really like at least it's worth responding to and being like, oh my God, that's horrible. And then he just never responded to it. So me saying good luck today was me being like, hey, look at my last text message to you, Right.
So from your perspective, you're like, yo, like, at 2 p.m., you're in the East Coast. I think he's on the East Coast as well. And,
he was on the same time. Yeah.
So you expect something. But if nothing, okay, he could be busy. Then you say good luck. He's like, yeah, thanks.
But, he says thank you.
And I mean, the only thing that the only reason why I would find this worthy of pointing out is because he reached out to you, expressing that he wanted to catch up.
Yeah, exactly. He wanted to catch up with me, and then I told him a very serious thing, or like what I deemed to be very serious at the time, and it is very serious.
Yeah, of course.
Serious,
I mean,
but
or
legally,
at least,
whatever.
See, that's the thing. You rightfully so. You weren't sure whether it was evidence suitable for an FBI investigation, but he could have told you, or at least in your mind, he could have told you whether or not it was.
At least respond to it. At least acknowledge that I just sent you a text message about a minor being kissed by a grown man, like that you're investigating. Like, at least acknowledge it.
I have to say good luck today, or maybe this is actually the beginning of the FBI, you getting in touch, because you said that you submitted the photo to the FBI.
No, I did that myself. I did it myself.
You didn't have the agent yet, though?
No, I just went to the FBI's website and was like, oh, you can, if you go to the FBI's website, there's like a place where you can submit a tip, and it's really easy, and you can just submit like suspicious things.
okay.
So I just did it. I don't remember the exact process. I would have to go through it again and to tell everybody how to do it, but it's honestly very easy, very self-explanatory.
Did you get a response from yours, or was it through her? Maybe that.
I didn't get a response, no, but I just submitted it, and it was a very very anticlimactic experience. But
well, see, but that's what I meant earlier when I said that it's got to be like written properly or valuable enough for like someone to respond, and that's why even though Creepshow Art in the chat said I don't want the shout out, I had to give the shout out because, you know, obviously that just proved right there that you didn't get a response, but they were able to hook it up and help out. I mean, so yeah, big shout.
Well, and that's why I texted that to him, because after he just said thank you and he didn't acknowledge the message about the picture. I was like, well, just so you know, I went ahead and did it. And then he just says, okay, good. Then this is going to give us big momentum as regarding the Jeffree Star interview, because this was like a couple hours before he was supposed to go on with it. And I was like, okay. I just felt really like underwhelmed, and really, I started getting really irritated around that point in time, also because I thought the Jeffree Star interview was bullshit. So I just got really, really irritated. And that's actually the night that me and you first spoke on a live stream together. Can I address somebody in the chat really quick?
Go on.
Somebody is saying a bunch of messages about that I talk nothing but crap online and stir a drama pot all the time, and I'm making this whole thing a joke, and that I ignored them completely and they were a survivor reaching out.
What?
And they're saying there's something else before that I'm trying to find. I think that it got deleted though. Oh no, they said, I guess if you don't agree with Ashlee, you get timed out because she's allowed to talk crap about everybody. This isn't like drama. This isn't tea. This isn't drama. This is like a 100% factual experience with screenshots. And this is me discussing who has the best interest in mind for survivors. So I'm just wondering.
Well, okay. And I want to make this clear. Like I said earlier, the live stream is titled Survivors, and you know, I have Ashlee on right now. Later on, we're gonna have Liz, and Kylie's also in the chat. I've also had an open invite. Slippery slope. If you are a survivor, I invite you as well. You know, there's nothing. It's there's a slight irony, and of course, I take it that it's an obvious, or I mean, it seems to me like it's a sock account. Slippery slope, baby. But if it's not, then that's okay.
If I ignored a survivor, that was not intentional. I get so many DMs about this stuff all the time that I do have to have some people kind of message me a bunch just to like get them bumped up to the top, because I have my Instagram requests are like in the 200s right now. Like I have a ton of messages that I try to filter through. So I would never intentionally ignore a survivor, especially regarding a Dahvie Vanity survivor. Like that's not something I would ever intentionally do. So I apologize if I did that.
Of course. And I mean, if you want to hop on and share your actual thoughts instead of ironically stirring the pot like you're accusing Ashlee of doing, that would be fantastic. But I said in the beginning of the stream, and I'll say it again, please just be respectful. This platform is open to all. But we're not trying to create friction here. And if you're about that, then that is probably why you're being timed out. Not because you can blame the mods all you want, but it's not because you whatever you said earlier. But yeah, just hit me up if you're serious. Otherwise, save your commentary, okay, please.
And and somebody says stop acknowledging the drama and get back on topic. I'm not trying to acknowledge drama. I saw something that concerned me if I ignored a survivor, and I wanted to point it out. So that's the end of that.
That's if someone's trying to create a derailing narrative, then okay. But as of right now, we've addressed you. So slippery slope. That is like my acknowledgement of why the mods kicked you timed you out rightfully. So if you continue to try to derail, I've opened up the invitation if you want to hit me up. I feel really bad if I ignored somebody. Like I would never mean to ignore a survivor like that. Like that makes me feel really bad. Shoot me an email with your Discord username, and I can put you on after we're finished. Otherwise, if you create more commentary in the chat room, like trying to create friction, the mods will probably time you out. This is not an easy stream. Like, this is really nerve wracking. Like, I was nervous, and I know she's like, if I'm feeling a little bit of nerve before like doing a live stream, I can only imagine for her, because she's been so involved in this for so long, you know. So just big ups. Before I go to the toilet, put a bunch of strawberries in the chat for Ashlee. She's like, seriously, so much. Like, what I see behind the scenes, like, she's been so helpful. Oh shit, never mind. I don't want to bring the waterworks. Never mind. I'll just quit fluffing her up for now. But yeah, give her support and be nice to her. Respect.
Yes, thank you, Edwin. I appreciate you a lot.
At the bottom of this text, he says, "Hi, do we have an address for Dahvie in Orlando?" And he says, "I don't have it, but I know the FBI agent does, and I think, you know, I believe that was another survivor does." Do you have any context to why he would ask you for Dahvie's address?
My thought, and I spoke to somebody else behind the scenes when he texted me that, and I was like, why would he need his address? Like, what does he need it for? But yeah, my thought was, okay, is he going to try to show up to his house? Like, is he going to try to pull an Onision thing where he shows up for an interview? So that's why I was like, I don't have it, but the FBI does. And I was like, well, maybe this person does, because I didn't want to be the one to give it to him, you know, because I felt weird about doing that.
Chris Hansen, why were you asking for Dahvie Vanity's address? So you've stated that Chris Hansen has sort of implied that he could help with law enforcement. Did he ever try to help in other resources as far as like mental health or anything like that? Because I feel like I've heard him say in live streams that he has or is looking for ways for that.
He said it on live streams, but he didn't actually ever talk about it with any
There's
of
nothing
us
ever been
personally.
mentioned? And like, because you've talked to him a fair bit on phone calls, right?
Yeah, me and him would talk. Whenever me and him would talk, it would usually be for quite a while. Our shortest phone call was actually after the whole thing with Repzilla, but yeah, we would talk for a while, and he never really said anything to me about it. I mean, he would talk about it in live streams and say like they're finding sources or resources for therapy for survivors, and then I never heard anything about that ever privately. He never discussed it with me, never reached out to me about any type of help, never anything like that.
Okay. Haley is actually in the chat, and she says that she remembers that he told her, and she says us, meaning like, you know, other, because she was on the show as a the
Onision stuff, right?
Right. She was interviewed in regards to Onision, and she said that he would get them therapists, but that didn't come through at all either. Obviously, like I've said, I've communicated with plenty of people that have been on his show, and I don't want to like, you know, say their names or put them in uncomfortable situations in any way. So I'm really grateful when, you know, they happen to catch the show, like Haley, you or Kylie, and like, you know, can see that I'm not like pulling this out of my butt, because like this is real, and like it's disappointing, because it's one thing to like, you know, come through and be like, okay, yeah, I'm giving you a platform, that's amazing, you know, but like to even mention like resources when you can't come through, I think that's not right.
It's just one of those things where it's like you could just not say it,
right,
and it would be fine.
It's not even about like getting you a personal therapist or anything like that, as much as it could be just as much as finding you local resources or something like that. Yeah, you know, like I
thankfully, thankfully we had somebody who is the assistant to our agent that is assigned to the case, and she actually reached out to me probably like a month or so ago, and she asked me if I needed any therapy or anything, and I told her, well, you know, I need to look into it. And within a couple of minutes, she sent me like a whole list of resources in my area just by doing a search.
I mean, yeah, that and you know, something like that could be like really like hopeful, I guess, like give you that courage, I guess, because, you know, I could go here and say, yeah, guys, go to rain.org and, you know, call this, or, you know, like sometimes when I see YouTubers say like, oh, description and this, it's like, it's not the same as when it's like personally suggested. I feel like that is very strong, and damn, shout out to that FBI agent.
Oh yeah, she was amazing. And it especially sucked for a period of time where I wasn't, you know, speaking out on anything, because people would always tag me in things like, oh my God, Chris Hansen is doing this, and this for survivors. He's so good. And I'm just over here like, he's not actually doing that. That's actually a lie, like just a bold-faced lie. But I didn't want to start anything, so I just kept quiet.
This one, he sent you text messages, and he said, you guys are close to Repzilla. You should tell him that's just not true, and that he should check things out before he accuses me of something like that. It's awful and speaks to his character. Was there a conversation between this or before this, or did he just kind of say this? Or
he sent me the screenshot of Repzilla posting Damien's post about how Damien wanted stuff to be donated from their super chats to some type of charity, and then Shane Repzilla ended up sharing that, just quoting what Damien was saying, not amping anything up, just quoting it and reporting on it like an investigative journalist might.
Ashlee responded and she said, he has wanted to speak to you for a while and is very open-minded to hear your side and clear the air from your perspective. Everyone is attacking me over every bit of this and I need a break from it all, but I will mention to him. And
I started getting really frustrated.
It's one thing to sort of fetch guests for his show, but then to be like, hey, that Repzilla guy, you seem like you talk like you're close to him. Why don't you tell him that he's doing the wrong thing? That's off-putting to me. I mean, this is my opinion, but I think that's really off-putting.
No, it was definitely very off-putting. Yeah. I felt like he just wanted, and that's not the first time that he would, kind of ask me or other people to do something for him as far as clearing up something. And it's like, no, you're a grown man. You can do it yourself. Okay. Like, I'm just a person on Twitter. Like,
I had been trying to get a hold of him since I started covering the Dahvie Vanity investigation on my channel. And, I think at that point in time, we were just trying to establish like a nice little circle of information between the survivors and all those that were covering it. It was always supposed to be, he's going to give me a call. And it never happened. And then finally, when it came down time to have a phone conversation, you got to remember originally we were trying to get this information loop going on. So he didn't actually call me until there was some sort of criticism on his end. You can pull that tweet up and you can see that I'm very careful in my wording.
So here's a tweet from Repzilla. Dahvie Vanity survivor Damien Leonhard, formerly known as Jesse Slaughter, claims the money earned from their stream with Chris Hansen was supposed to be donated, but he ghosted them. Damien here was expressing distaste for the whole concept of Hansen selling the Dahvie Vanity story, and that they wanted all the super chat money donated.
And then Ashlee sent me what Chris was saying to her behind my back. This upset me, but I didn't jump to conclusions. I waited. I was very patient. I was waiting for him to call. He didn't get a hold of me. And so when he made his video and he sat there and he said what he said in that video.
Over the weekend, one content creator suggested that one of my guests, Damien Leonhard, otherwise known as Jesse Slaughter, one of Dahvie's victims, was upset because she didn't get super chat money from her appearance on the show. Damien was an incredible guest, courageous, brave, told her story in a very compelling way. We had a discussion about super chat donations going to a charity of her choice. I said, yeah, I can work that out, not a problem. The super chat money from a particular stream
ended up being $17.96. We'll make sure that goes to the charity of Damien's choice. The allegation also from this content creator was that somehow I had ghosted Damien. That couldn't be further from the truth. I would never ghost anyone who's ever appeared on my show. She knows how to get a hold of me. I've reached out to her. I can only believe that somehow he's not being truthful about this, or that he caught her at a very vulnerable moment and there was some sort of misunderstanding. Damien can call me anytime, and that's just not an issue. But to say that in this highly charged emotional environment is just absolutely irresponsible.
That's weird. He's saying that Repzilla suggested that Damien was upset when we can clearly see that Damien was upset. What? Bro.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like Damien made that post on their own, and I just don't understand. I don't understand how you can't spin that around. You can't spin that in a different way.
Okay, see, that's confusing to me because Repzilla didn't really make a comment about how Damien felt. Repzilla just posted the screenshot. So obviously, YouTubers are tuning in because he's addressing not only Repzilla, but he addressed some things from Repzion, some things from John Swan, and here and there, other things that he's been criticized for. Thank you for checking out this recap from my live stream. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and it'll let me know that you guys are interested in this and want me to keep doing this, because this is actually part of a 4-hour-long live stream, so I might have some more to put up. Subscribe with notifications so you don't miss the next live stream, or check out my Patreon and watch them the next day.